Rishi Uvacha iti avyalikam pranuto bja nabas tam aba vase vachas tam ritena suparna paksho pari rocha mana prema mito dvikshana vibramad bruhu. Maitreya resumed, sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. Okay, so purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The word Vachasamritena is significant. Whenever the Lord speaks, he speaks from the transcendental world. He does not speak from the material world. Since he is transcendental, his speech is also transcendental, as is his activity. Everything in relation to him is transcendental. The word Amrita refers to one who does not meet with death. The words and activities of the Lord are deathless. Therefore, they are not manufactured of this material world. The sound of this material world and that of the spiritual world are completely different. The sound of the spiritual world is nectarine and eternal, whereas the sound of the material world is hackneyed and subject to end. Hackneyed means something that's stale, been used over and over again. And the sound of the material world is hackneyed and subject to end. The sound of the holy name, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, everlastingly increases the enthusiasm of chanting. If one repeats monotonous material worlds, he will feel exhausted. But if he chants Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, he will never feel exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. When the Lord replied to the sage Kardama, the word Vachasamritena is specifically mentioned, since he spoke from the transcendental world. He replied in transcendental words, and when he spoke, his eyebrows moved with great affection. When a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied, and he bestows his transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation, because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this verse is Canto 3, Chapter 21, verse 22. Is that right? Sorry. 22. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see here. Hmm. Yeah. I continuously offer, I'm sorry, 22. My wisdom, sincerely extolled, or extolled means uh, to
Praise.
raise, yeah. Sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. So when we praise the Lord is very pleased, and his devotee becomes very pleased also. So this is real pleasure, real happiness, real, let's say, uh, loving reciprocation when the Lord is praised, and the Lord will actually also praise his devotees. So Maitreya resumes, sincerely extolled in these words. So extolled means praised. Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. So you can just imagine, the majesty of the discussion that's going on here. Lord Vishnu is on the shoulders of Garuda, and he is uh, being praised, uh, and then after being praised. Now he's speaking back, uh, and uh, that means that it's not really difficult to see God if one is a pure devotee, and then faith in God is no longer something what you would call uh, a um, it's not something uh, that is imagined. It's factual, and it's being more real than whatever we're experiencing in the material world. It's on the spiritual platform, and therefore is full of nectar. And that nectar is just like uh, eating fresh uh, honey from a beehive. It's full of nectar, and it's not. It hasn't been, let's say, altered in any way. It's pure nectar, and this is what the devotees experience. This nectar is uh, what sustains the enthusiasm of a devotee, and that means that devotee becomes more interested and more enthusiastic to glorify the Lord and his infinite qualities and pastimes. So that builds uh, competition of increment and measurement. As the Lord is being glorified uh, by the devotee, the Lord's pleasure increases, and as the Lord's pleasure increases, the devotee's pleasure increases. So there's this measurement and increment. Uh, every time, every statement that's made uh, is measured, and in the process of being measured, it increases. So the enthusiasm is never waning; it's always increasing. This is the life of a devotee. Is as soon as uh, one glorifies the Lord's satisfaction and happiness increases. And when the devotee sees that his satisfaction and happiness increases, and so forth, it goes on and on and on infinitely. So there's no limit to the transcendental happiness of the devotee and the Lord. This is the spiritual world. In the material world, there's a lot of boredom. There's sometimes tragedy. There's arguing. There's differences of opinion. That's normal in the material world. One person has an opinion, someone else comes up with another opinion, and it goes on and on and on like that. But in the spiritual world, one never feels exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. When the Lord replied to the sage Kardama, the word Vachas Samritena is specifically mentioned since he spoke from the transcendental world. He replied in transcendental words, and when he spoke, his eyebrows moved with great affection. When a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied, and he bestows his transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation, because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. Okay, so to experience this, all we have to do is follow the regulatory principles and chant Hare Krishna unendingly. And then, as Prabhupada says here in this purport, the sound of the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, everlastingly increases the enthusiasm of the chanter. If one repeats the monotonous material worlds, he will feel exhausted. But if he chants Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, he will never feel exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. Okay, so this is Krishna speaking to Kardama Muni. All right. And the verse says, sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. So you can imagine how intensely transcendental this exchange is between the Lord and Maitreya, not Maitreya, the Lord and who? Yeah, Kardama. Sorry. Yeah. When the Lord replied to the sage Kardama, the words Vachastam Ritena is specifically mentioned since he spoke from the transcendental world. Okay, so there are experiences in the material world, but there are also experiences in the spiritual world. So now we're getting the flavor of the experiences of the spiritual world by reading this exchange of words and phrases between Kardama Muni and Krishna. And when it says, when the Lord replied to the sage Kardama, the word Vachasam is specifically mentioned since he, meaning the Lord, spoke from the transcendental world. He replied in transcendental words, and when he spoke, his eyebrows moved with great affection. When a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied, and he bestows his transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation, because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. And this is like nectar to the ears, hearing this. This is actually the transcendental uh, exchanges that take place eternally. And there is what you call this measurement and increment. As you hear something and you try and, let's say, measure it in your mind or capture it in your mind, in the process, it increases. So there's never any boredom in the spiritual realm or in the material world if the devotees are full of this enthusiasm. And here Prabhupada says, if one repeats monotonous material world words, he will feel exhausted. But if he chants Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, he will never feel exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. Now, that is exactly the experience that Haridas Thakur had. He never felt exhausted by chanting Hare Krishna. So when the prostitute was sent by this adversary of Haridas Thakur, she tried to make him fall down. But because he had a vow to chant a certain number of mantras, Hare Krishna mantras a day, something like more than 300,000 times a day. He didn't have any time to stop chanting because it takes 23 and a half hours to chant that many rounds. So uh, the uh, the prostitute had to wait till he finished his chanting, which, of course, she fell asleep waiting for him, and then she'd wake up in the early morning, and he had already started chanting his rounds again. In other words, he chanted 23 and a half hours a day. And then he had a half an hour to do things like bathe or maybe eat a little something. And then he'd be chanting again. So she was waiting for him. Then she'd fall asleep. And she'd wake up. He had already uh, started chanting again and the next day. So she never got a chance to try and make him fall down. However, she became purified by hearing his chanting, and she became a devotee. Now, this is the secret to not be enticed by something material, but rather to transform something material into something spiritual. That is let's say, the power of pure chanting of the holy name. Everything in the material world seems to be material, but actually everything is spiritual, but it's covered by sense gratification. When the sense gratification stops and there's only pure chanting of the holy name of the Lord and pure words of glorification of the Lord, that covering is purified. And now spiritual reality is actually experienced. So, what we're reading here is actually the spiritual reality that is possible to achieve even in the material world. Just like it says, if one repeats monotonous material worlds, he will feel exhausted. But if he chants Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, he will never feel exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. When the Lord replied to sage Kardama, the words Vachasam Ritena is specifically mentioned, since he spoke from the transcendental world. He replied in transcendental words. And when he spoke, his eyebrows moved with great affection. When a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied, and he bestows his transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. But this is what we should aspire for. This is what we would try and experience by chanting sincerely and purely without any, let's say, offenses to the holy name or offenses to holy Dham or offenses to devotees. There's, there's different levels of offenses. There's offenses to the holy Dham, offenses to devotees, offenses to the spiritual master. When all those offenses stop, how do they stop? They stop when we get it. We become serious about constantly chanting Hare Krishna. That's why it says, but if the devotee chants Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, he will never feel exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. Okay, so is it possible to do this? Yes, it is. If Kardama Muni was able to do it, we're not on the same level as Kardama Muni, but the possibility to chant like that is there. Uh, all we have to do is regularly chant and hear. Hearing is also like what you would say chanting because either you're chanting or hearing. In both ways, you're directly connected to Krishna. Okay, when it says that when he spoke, his eyebrows moved with great affection. That can only happen when one is spiritually, let's say, surcharged by the movement. Then you're able to move the eyebrows with great affection. And uh, whenever a person is spiritually, let's say, uh, spiritually enlightened, they have such a person has different movements of the eye and eyebrows and different movements of the body that show that he or she is in a state of transcendental loving affection for Krishna. Whenever somebody has loving affection for Krishna, there are bodily movements also that are uh, indicative of their state of mind, their transcendental state of mind. And when there's extreme ecstasy, sometimes the arms are uh, go back into the body. In other words, there are temporary deformations of the body because of the extreme ecstasy that the devotee feels. Did you know that? Mhm. Let's look that up.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu demonstrated.
What's that?
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu
Experience that.
experienced that.
Yeah. You know where it says it? Whenever there's extreme ecstasy, uh, glorifying the Lord, the bodily appendages like the arms and, and the head and so forth, they can, let's say, be uh, can be deformed due to the ecstasy. It doesn't mean they stay like that forever. It means that due to the ecstasy, sometimes the arms go back into the body. This, of course, don't try and do anything like this. It has to happen naturally due to extreme affection for the Lord. You see, nonsense people, they'll like sometimes mutilate themselves to imitate such a thing. But you don't have to mutilate your body, but your body can become deformed because of extreme ecstasy. But that doesn't mean your body has been cut off or anything, any of the appendages of the body are cut off. They can disappear into the body and come back again. If you ever see something like that, you would be completely shocked. And that, I think you said Lord Chaitanya experienced that.
Yeah, it's, I'm just going to find the exact reference.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:240, the conversation between King Nimi and Navayogendra, certain symptoms of ecstasy are described. These include standing of the hairs on the body,
Okay. Hair standing up.
yeah, choking of the voice, trembling of the body, and then Gopi's ecstasy in the 10th canto, 35th chapter, 9th to 11th. The Gopis of Vrindavan exhibited various ecstatic symptoms when they remember their bodies exhibit transformations such as hair standing on end, tears flowing from eyes. So these are the different physical transformations. Pulaka means hair standing on end, Ashru, tears, Gadgada, choking of the voice, Kampana, trembling, Nritya, dancing, Unmada, seeming madness. So these are all the.
Yeah, there's more. There's actually more. And there's sometimes there's deformation of the body, where appendages seem to go into the body of the devotee. And um, anyway, there are definitely changes of the body when one is in extreme state of ecstasy. Okay. What's most important here is when it says, when a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied. And he bestows his transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation, because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. Okay, so to get uh, unlimited transcendental benediction from the Lord
Yeah, so this
is really in the goal of Krishna consciousness. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just found one. At times, Lord Chaitanya's body would manifest extreme transformation due to ecstatic love, such as becoming elongated or contracted, or joints of his limbs becoming separated.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, read that again.
At times, Lord Chaitanya's body would manifest extreme transformations due to ecstatic love, such as becoming elongated or contracted, or the joints of his limbs becoming separated.
Yeah. Now, of course, if you saw that, you would think, "Oh, something terrible is happening," right? But actually, it's something wonderful. It's not terrible at all. So someone would call, the police or the fire department or get an ambulance to take the person to the hospital. But actually, there's nothing wrong with the person. It's just uh, some example of ecstatic love for the Lord.
It is also describing the pastimes of Lord Jagannath Maharaj.
Yeah, well, look at Lord Jagannath's body. How did it end up like that? There are different explanations. One of it is that when uh, Krishna and
It says their eyes became oversized and dilated. Their
yeah,
hands and legs withdrew into their bodies.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's how you get the form. It looks very strange to materialists, but it's when Krishna and Balaram and Subhadra were going to meet the gopis, there was there were different camps. When Krishna was present, and the gopis from Vrindavan came to have darshan of Krishna. So Balaram and Krishna and Subhadra wanted to see them, but as they approached their camp, they heard them speaking with love and devotion, and they went into a state of ecstasy where their bodies deformed. And it's not a negative thing; it's a positive thing, and that's how you get the form of Krishna and Subhadra and Balaram. It doesn't look normal, right? The arms are stunted and so forth. Their eyes are much bigger. Yes.
It's also saying, there was one that's saying other symptoms of ecstatic love include stunned, perspiring, hair standing.
Perspiration. Does it say perspirizing?
Perspiring.
Perspiring. Yeah.
Sunburst, fever, romancha. Yeah, go ahead.
Hair standing on end, bladder and voice trembling, body changing bodily colors, shedding tears, devastation, inertness, and trance.
Yeah. There's bodily change and many different symptoms that show that the person is in ecstasy. That you can't really uh, emulate that or uh, artificially do that. You can try, but it won't be the real thing. All right. So, when a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied, and he bestows his transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. Now, that is called reciprocation of love and devotion between the devotee and the Lord. So, praising the glories of the Lord satisfies the Lord. So, how can you praise the Lord? Well, we have the Brahma Samhita, and the verses of the Brahma Samhita praises the Lord in a very, very ecstatic and transcendental way. Let's read a little bit about that. What it says here. And Venum Kwanantam Aravinda Dalayatakshan Parhavatam Sam Asitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarbhakoti Kamaniya Vishesa Sobham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Chintamani Prakata Sadma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vrite Susurabhi Avipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satatam Brahm Devyamanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis and Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head bedecked, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. Alola Chandra Kalasat Vanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayateli Kalavilasam Shyamam Jibanga Lalita Nilita Prakasam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose grateful threefold bending form of Shamsundara is eternally manifest. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti pasyanti panti kalayanti chiran jaganti ananda chinmaya sadujvala vigrahasya govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, and who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth, meaning he never gets old. Pantastu koti satavatsada sampragamyo vayo ratapi manaso manipungamanam. Sopyasti yat prapadasimya vichintya tatte govindam adipurisham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. So this is a very interesting verse. After so much effort of many lifetimes of meditation and so forth, one may hardly achieve the tip of the toe of the lotus feet of the Lord. And that's after a lot of arduous, very difficult tapasya that the Gyanis perform, and extending over thousands of millions of years. And in the purport, the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that is to this text 34 of the Brahma Samhita. Actually, this is Lord Brahma speaking. The attainment of the lotus feet of Govinda consists in the realization of unalloyed devotion. The Kaivalya, realized non-alternative state. In other words, it's the state of consciousness where one is completely focused on the Lord, and you don't drop that or go away from that. It's non-alternative, which is attained by the Astanga yogis by practicing trance for thousands of millions of years, and the state of merging into the non-differentiated impersonality of Godhead beyond the range of limitation attained by the non-dualists after a similar period passed in distinguishing between the spiritual and non-spiritual, and eliminating things of the limited sphere one after another by the formula not this, not that, or neti, are simply the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna and not the lotus feet themselves. The long and short of the matter is this: Kaivalya, or merging into Brahman, constitutes the line of demarcation between the world of limitation, meaning the material world, and the transcendental world. For unless we step beyond them, we can have no taste of the variegatedness of the transcendental sphere. These conditions are a simple absence of misery arising from mundane affinity, but are not real happiness or felicity. If the absence of misery be called a bit of pleasure, then also that bit is very small and of no consequence. It is not sufficient to destroy the condition of materiality, but the real gain to the jiva is his eternal existence in a self-realized state. This can be attained only by the grace of unalloyed devotion, which is essentially chit, or transcendental in character. For this end, abstract and uninteresting mental speculation is of no avail. Okay, so this is a very profound purport, and the verse itself is very profound because it shows that some yogis and people can undertake very long, let's say, periods of tapasya that can last thousands of years. And they hardly can reach the tip of the toe of the Lord after all that effort. Why? Well, because the Lord is not really, let's say, pleased by tapasya, although it's not a bad thing. But the Lord is very pleased by the pure devotion of love. So that's why it says here that only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. So, if one chooses to try and understand Krishna as a jnani or as a yogi, it's very difficult, virtually impossible in the age of Kali. First of all, we don't live thousands of years. We live hardly even, 60, 80, or 100 years. That's it. So we would have to take birth many, many times and continue the same, let's say, severe meditation to achieve what a pure devotee can achieve very quickly. So there are different types of yoga. Yoga means how to connect to Krishna. So some people want to do it through pranayama and so forth. Uh, the asanas and pranayama and so forth, or reciting the verses. However, it says here, the attainment of the lotus feet of the unalloyed devotion. So that is the way we can quickly attain the lotus feet of Govinda. It's by unalloyed devotion. The Kaivalya, realized non-alternative state, which is attained by the Astanga yogis by practicing trance for thousands and millions of years, and the stage of merging into the non-differentiated impersonality of Godhead beyond the range of limitation attained non-dualists after a similar period of thousands of millions of years. A similar period passed in distinguishing between the spiritual and non-spiritual and eliminating things of the limited sphere one after another by the formula of neti, not this, not that, are simply the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna and not the lotus feet themselves. The long and short, now that is what you would call a saying. The long and short of the matter. Look that up. What does that mean? Long and short. It's in other words, it's implying it's a very complicated thing, and that you may be able to summarize in a few words, or you could take many, many words, infinite number of words to explain. So the long and short of the matter is this. Kaivalya, or merging into the Brahman, constitutes the line of demarcation between the world of limitation and the transcendental world. What does the long and short mean?
Yeah, go ahead.
All that can or need be said.
What's that? Say it again.
All that can or need be said.
Oh, all that can or need be said. Yeah. So in other words, all that can or need be said, that is as much as you're able to describe something.
The idiomatic expression used to summarize the most important points or the essence of the situation, often in a concise manner.
Okay, yeah, that's more uh, more information about long and short of something. Okay, so therefore it says here, the attainment of the lotus feet of Govinda consists in the realization of unalloyed devotion. The Kaivalya, realized non-alternative state. Well, what is realized non-alternative state? It means that you have fixed your mind on Krishna without any deviation. not even 1 second of deviation. The kaivalya, realized non-alternative state, which is attained by the Astanga Yoga. See, this is the difference between pure devotee and someone who watches television or video games. Just they can't. All those games are teaching us not to be able to focus on one thing. It's 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0. That's that is the whole binary culture. But we are involved in the what is it?
Monary.
Yeah, monary. The monary culture. One, right? Not two or infinitely. So all the uh, the uh, the things that cause distraction are binary. Let's say binary elements of mass distraction: television, video games, all those things. Whereas Krishna consciousness is monary; it's focusing on one thing. That one thing is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So just this is called what you would say is extreme, let's say, difference between binary and monary. Traditionally, kids were taught to meditate on one thing, Krishna. Today, kids are taught to meditate on many things. And it's just like when kids start talking, they begin talking about one thing, then they go to another 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 thing. Because it's easier to talk about many things than it is to focus on one thing. Because if you focus on Krishna consciousness, you could speak the rest of your life. If you focus on many things, you get bored after a little while. So the boredom is due, it's called hackneyed. Look that word up, hackneyed. It's repeating things a few times and getting really tired of doing it. You know, just like devotees, when they're talking nonsense, eventually they get tired of doing it. They need a break. But when you're chanting Hare Krishna, you can keep going without stopping. Go ahead. Yeah, what is it? Hackneyed.
Lacking have been overused.
Say that again.
Lacking significance through having been overused.
Yeah. Hackneyed means you repeat something too many times and you get tired of saying it anymore. Right. In other words, it's another way of saying it. Same old, same old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You meet someone and what they used to say 50 years ago, they're still saying the same thing, talking about baseball or football or something like that. That's hackneyed, right? It's boring. Yes.
So I've also searched same old. That it's an idiom that means a situation or someone's behavior remains the same, especially when boring or annoying. For example, you get tired of eating the same thing for breakfast. The phrase is usually informal and can be slightly disapproving.
It can be what?
Slightly disapproving.
Disapproving. Yeah. Now you get sick and tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. Now, do we get tired chanting Hare Krishna over and over again? No, because it's transcendental vibration. But a mundane vibration, you can get tired of it very quickly. Just like one man said, look, it doesn't matter. You chant Hare Krishna, you chant Coca-Cola, it's the same. It's the breathing that counts. Like that. There was some crazy guy that said that. Hare Krishna, Coca-Cola, same thing. It's the breathing. It's not the vibration of the mantra. But no, it is the vibration of the mantra. The vibration of mantra you could say forever. But Coca-Cola, if you vibrate that, you get bored very quickly, you know. So you go Coca-Cola, then it'll be Pepsi-Cola, then it'll be some other cola, right? It's not going to be the same thing over and over and over again. That becomes hackneyed. That becomes boring and overused, you know. So, okay, so in the Brahma Samhita text 34, it says, the attainment of the lotus feet of Govinda consists in the realization of unalloyed devotion. The Kaivalya, realized non-alternative state, which is attained by the Astanga yogis by practicing trance for thousands of millions of years, and the state of merging into the non-differentiated impersonality of Godhead beyond the range of limitation attained by non-dualists after a similar period passed in distinguishing between the spiritual and non-material, and the spiritual and non-spiritual, and eliminating things of the limited sphere one after another by the formula, not this, not that, are simply. So those are two different ways of trying to approach Krishna. One is going into a trance of Astanga yoga, which is performed by Astanga yogis for thousands of millions of years, or going through the philosophical process of elimination, neti, the truth is not this, or reality, the truth is not this, it's not that. Also, lasting thousands of millions of years, just like the Astanga yogis, their process will be done for thousands of millions of years, and those who want to use the process of neti, also it will be thousands of millions of years. Are simply, they'll only achieve the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna. In other words, they don't really achieve the lotus feet of Krishna. They just come to the outskirts. The long and short of the matter is this Kaivalya, emerging into the Brahman, constitutes the line of demarcation between the world of limitation and the transcendental world. For unless we step beyond them, we can have no taste of the variegatedness of the transcendental sphere. Okay, now that's a very important statement. Variegatedness of the transcendental world. That means we would never get tired of hearing things in the spiritual world like we do in the material world, because there is infinite variegatedness in the spiritual world. And there's a saying in English that says, variety is the, it says, variety is the taste of happiness, something like that. It's a saying in English.
Spice of life.
What?
Variety is the spice of
Oh,
life.
yes, variety is the spice of life. So the real variety is happening in the spiritual world, not in the material world. The variety is the spice of life. infinite nectar in the spiritual world. Therefore, one never gets bored. So there's a difference between happiness due to the absence of misery and happiness due to ecstatic love of Krishna. Absence of misery may give some little bit of happiness, but it won't last very long. However, the happiness derived by love and devotion for Krishna is never ending. So that's what's said here. These conditions are the simple absence of misery. It's just like if you buy shoes that are too small for your feet. And now, why did they buy it? Why did someone buy shoes that are too small for their feet? Because they didn't have that model of shoe in their foot size. But because of their vanity, they bought what they did have, which were the same model, but in a smaller size. So when they put that shoe on and they walk around all day long, satisfied having this nice shoe, but it's too small for their feet, when they get home and take off the shoe, they say, "Oh, that feels so good." Taking it off, right? Because why? Because it's hurting their foot all day long, walking around with the shoes that are too small for their feet. So that's not real happiness. Real happiness is having shoes of the right size, and you don't even want to take them off. There's some people. There was this one man who he bought these really nice shoes, but he couldn't wear them to work because his job was a very unclean type of job. So he would put on his regular shoes, his work shoes, during the day, and at night he would put on his special shoes when he slept. so, so it says here, unless we step beyond. Okay, it says, this is very interesting. The long and short of the matter is this kaivalya, or merging into the Brahman, constitutes the line of demarcation between the world of limitation and the transcendental world. For unless we step beyond them, we can have no taste of the variegatedness of the transcendental sphere. These conditions are the simple absence of misery arising from mundane affinity, but are not real happiness or felicity. If the absence of misery be called a bit of pleasure, then also that bit is very small and of no consequence. It is not sufficient to destroy the condition of materiality. But the real gain to the jiva is his eternal existence in his self-realized state. This can be attained only by the grace of unalloyed devotion, which is essentially chit, or transcendental in character. For this end, abstract and uninteresting mental speculation. For this end, abstract and uninteresting mental speculation is of no avail. So, what the so-called yogis are doing, meditation, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, it's a waste of time. And it's not really yoga. It's some speculation that they've made up, right? So, but there is a type of yoga that you can do 24 hours a day. It's called Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That's also yoga. Yoga usually implies focusing on one thing unlimitedly. Well, that's something you can do by chanting Hare Krishna, but you can't do it by silent meditation, because at a certain point you'll break your silent meditation and you're back where you started from. Okay, I think we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? So there's a major statement here. It says, simple absence of misery arising from mundane affinity, but are not real happiness or felicity. So a person who buys shoes that are too small for their feet, but they like the model. Well, after walking all day long with those shoes, when they come home and take off the shoe, they say, oh, that feels so good. Well, that's the negative happiness. It's not real happiness. It's simply the absence of misery, right? So that you cannot call that positive happiness. It's a negative happiness. It's because it's a temporary, let's say, temporary stop of misery. But real happiness is unending. And that's why it says, it is not sufficient to destroy the condition of materiality, but the real gain to the jiva is his eternal existence in a self-realized state. This can be attained only by the grace of unalloyed devotion, which is essentially chit, or transcendental in character. For this end, abstract and uninteresting mental speculation is of no avail. So there's something called not real happiness or facility. And there's something else called transcendental happiness. So the merging into the Brahman, that's not real happiness. That's just the elimination of misery, but it's not there, but there's no positive happiness in it. There's some happiness because you're not suffering anymore. It's just like the happiness you feel when you take off shoes that are too small for your feet. But that's not real happiness. The real happiness is infinite and constantly growing, or constantly uh, in enhancing, or constantly uh, unending happiness. Okay. So it says, but the real gain to the jiva is his eternal existence in a self-realized state. This can be attained only by the grace of unalloyed devotion, which is essentially chit, or transcendental in character. For this end, abstract and uninteresting mental speculation is of no avail. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very, very much. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask?
Any questions online? So this obviously Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur English, like very you need a very
It's the King's English.
yeah. So he's basically distinguishing between Kaivalya, which is what the Mayavadis,
Yogi and Jnani.
Jnani, and then so they're saying like they're touching the outskirts of the lotus feet.
After hundreds and thousands,
Thousands of millions of years.
millions of years. Difficult. In other words, it's impossible. But just by chanting Hare Krishna sincerely without any offense, you'll achieve that state very easily. And it'll be continual. I remember when I first started chanting Hare Krishna, I felt this happiness that I never felt before. And then of course it just continued, I haven't stopped. That's the nature of the holy name. Okay, no questions?
I don't see any raised hands. There was one question, which is here it says 24 hours of chanting. In the actual purport, Radhamani was advised to chant 24 hours. So
How is that possible?
yeah, how to do that.
Okay, so it's always keep your mind on Krishna. So how can you do that? Well, like for example, after chanting all day long, when you're getting ready to take some rest, if you pray to Krishna, please, Krishna, I'm going to take some rest now. Please let me be able to remember you even while I'm sleeping. So by that intense desire to always be Krishna conscious will help you have dreams about him. So that way, 24 hours a day, you can be connected to Krishna. While in your awakened state and even in your sleeping state. Now, is this possible? Yes, it is. For example, the exalted devotees like Harivilas Thakur and others, they hardly slept at all. They were so enthused by chanting Hare Krishna. Now, we can't emulate that, but we can chant as much as we can. And then pray to Krishna, please, Krishna, don't let me forget you even while I'm asleep. And it's possible that you can have dreams about Krishna. So in that way, 24 hours a day, you're thinking of the Lord. Or another way is that before you go to sleep, you say, Krishna, now I'm going to take rest. Please let me wake up soon so I can continue my service for you. So soon is what? Prabhupada says that normally 6 hours of rest is enough. You don't need 8 or 20 or what, just 6 hours. And even that can be, let's say, diminished by practice of Krishna consciousness. Okay, because when you go to sleep, you're in the mode of ignorance. When you wake up, you're in the mode of passion. When you hear Bhagavatam, you're in the mode of goodness. And when you chant your rounds, you're in the mode of goodness. So that's why someone like Harivilas Thakur, who we cannot imitate, is chanting almost 24 hours a day. So he's completely in the transcendental mode of goodness. Right? But we can come close to that by chanting Hare Krishna and engaging in devotional service. So devotional service and chanting Hare Krishna are equal because it's focusing on Krishna both ways, whether you're engaged in devotional service with the Lord or whether you're chanting the holy names of the Lord. So if you put those two together, that would be chanting almost a whole day.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll stop there. Thank you very much. And we'll pick up 12 hours from now.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.